we didn't just crawl out of a cave. We don't have to invent the wheel, discover the use of fire. There are certain things that went before us, but in the arrogance of the now, so many people think that because they had the internet and we didn't when we were growing up, those of us of a certain age, that makes them smarter. Well, there's a difference between smart and wise. There's a difference between being educated and having wisdom. I know an awful lot of people with advanced degrees who have no wisdom at all, and I know an awful lot of other people who don't have advanced degrees and are wiser than those who do. Maybe that's what the scripture means when it said God is far wiser than the wisest man. So I always begin with him, who is much smarter than I am, and figuring out what he already knows and what I have to learn from the past, and then I try not to make those same mistakes that people who went before made. I'll make enough of my own. Why should I go repeat what they did? Why would you do that? Why would you, if you're going to take a trip to Paris, not get a guidebook and find out where the tourist traps are and avoid them, the best restaurants are and patronize them, the great tourist places to go and visit them? Why would you just get another book of these are terrible places and go there? Why would you do that? That makes no sense. So we have people and ideas and philosophies and learning that went before if we will pay attention. Because while we may change clothing styles, hairstyles, lifestyles, the way we live, there is something about humanity that is the same as it has always been from the beginning. Emotions, relationships, all of these other things, the certain needs of every human being remain the same. And we function best, whether we're talking about our bodies and having the right kind of vitamins and minerals and exercise and the rest to take care of our bodies, or in our government. We function best when we embrace those principles that actually work and discard the ones that have proven themselves that they don't work. The thing that frustrates me as a native Washingtonian, as one who's lived there most of his life and writes about these things, is that we've gotten to a point where Republicans and Democrats seem to be only after what advances their own agenda and their own political life. And this is why Bob Beckel, my very, very good friend, a liberal Democrat and one of my dearest, dearest friends, and I wrote this book together called Common Ground, How to Stop the Partisan War That's Destroying America. We do this column every other week in USA Today, and we make our points from our perspectives, but we always try to argue it down to a point where we can agree on something coming out of the issue that will move the ball forward, or in the words of our founders, promote the general welfare. Now in Washington, it appears, people only want to promote their own welfare, their party's welfare. And so even if somebody in the other party comes up with a terrific idea, whether it's on Medicare reform or whatever it is, you must not agree with it if you're a member of the opposite party, because that will give them additional power and credibility with the people, and they might get elected again. So it's all about them. This is why I am an absolutely firm devotee of term limits. We must recycle trash and Congress for the same reason. Because each left in one place too long begins to emit a foul smell. Let me tell you my favorite story on this, and this says everything you need to know on this subject. My good friend, and he is my good friend, George McGovern, for whom I have an awful lot of respect, World War II veteran, bomber, gunner, tail gunner, practiced family values better than a lot of my conservative friends, married 56 years to the same woman, never any scandal associated with him, a man of integrity, happens to be a liberal. When he was defeated in the Reagan landslide in 1980, 5 Democratic senators were beaten in that election. George had not done anything other than public service since coming back from World War II. And so he decided to do something totally different. He went up to Connecticut and bought an inn and tried to run it. Well, the thing went bankrupt after a couple of years, and Wall Street Journal called him up to do an interview, wanted to know what happened. And in the classic line, and he loves it when I quote him on this, by the way, it tells you everything you need to know about people who stay too long in Washington and get out of touch with reality and what's happening with real Americans. George said, gee, if I'd known how difficult it was to run a business, I might have voted differently in the Senate. Does that say it all? Do you need to know anything else? These are people who can raise their own pay. How many of you have ever worked for somebody where you could do that? These are people who can pass laws for you and don't have to live under them themselves. These are people who have retirement and health and all kinds of stuff paid for by you and me. They don't have to make a balance a budget. They don't have to do a balance sheet. They don't have to make payroll. They don't have to do anything. They're taken care of by us. So sure, they're going to get out of touch real fast with how real people live. The founders wanted men and later women to come to Washington from their farms, their law offices, their businesses, their whatever, and do limited public service and go home to their real life, not to make it a career. And it's become a career. And we need to get them out for their own sake as well as our sake. Now imagine the difference. And the argument comes, several arguments against that. They say, well, think of all of the expertise we would lose. I said, if we're getting this with their expertise, give me some amateurs, okay? So those are some of the time-honored truths by which I try to, order my life. But it gets strange in Washington. I went to a party a few years ago. Bush 41, as we call him, was vice president. I was introducing my wife to some people, Raleigh Evans, of Evans and Novak column. He's dead now, but it came up. I said, Raleigh, I want you to meet my first wife. Oh, how do you do? Later he gets me over in the corner. He said, what are you doing bringing your first wife here? I said, it's the only one I've had. Kind of a new thought for him. He had it crossed his mind before. At least I have a family tree. It appears an awful lot of people have kudzu out there. I don't know how many people are familiar with Carrie Fisher. She was Princess Leia in Star Wars. Her parents were Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, and they were really hot in the 50s, the big hot celebrity couple. This would be the 1950s, not the 1850s. And she does this thing. She wrote this book, and she does this HBO show called Strictly Drinking. And she's been through a lot of difficult stuff, drugs, and married to Paul Simon and all kinds of other challenges. And so she does this thing. She got this board up there, and she said, well, here are my parents. They're most famous people in the 1950s. They divorced because my father decided to have an affair with Elizabeth Taylor, okay? And then he marries somebody else, and then she marries this shoe salesman. And then Elizabeth Taylor divorces him to marry Richard Burton. And she got this whole thing, this whole chart. And so the last two, she says, now if we can just get these two married to each other, the circle will be complete. But then she said something that really struck me. Sometimes when you hear something, it could be in a speech or a sermon or whatever, you don't even have to write it down. It's so profound it just sticks in your brain cells. She said, and this is really a rebuke of our culture, I think, celebrity is obscurity biding its time. That is a brilliant line. If I ever meet her, I'm going to tell her that. Celebrity is obscurity biding its time. A songwriter put it this way some years ago. Fame, if you win it, comes and goes in a minute. Where's the real stuff in life to cling to? But where do you see the real stuff in life in our culture? You go to the checkout stand at the grocery store. Yes, ladies, I do go there. And it's all about sex, who's living with whom, celebrities, out-of-wedlock births, who's getting married this week, and last week they were married to somebody else, doesn't matter. Why don't they just live together? And there's nothing about men and women of character, integrity, fidelity, honesty, virtue, all of these things that are not caught like a cold, but have to be drummed into people. But the culture doesn't do that anymore because we've all been taught that, that's a moral opinion and you can't impose that on people. Really? Why do you teach them table manners then when they're 6? Do they catch those on their own, table manners? Would you not tell them to be quiet while an adult is speaking? Things are not caught like a cold. They have to be drummed into people. Because the diagnosis of us, spoken many thousands of years ago, continues to remain true despite the age of Oprah, despite the age of Dr. Phil. Touchy-feely. We are, and always will be, get ready, sinners. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And not in need of reformation, but in need, rather, of redemption. And none of the externals can do that. So, anyway, just some random thoughts and a bunch of things. Thank you very much for the one Baptist among us here. I would be happy now. All you older people, don't dominate. I want to hear from the students too, because it's a confused lot out there these days in our colleges and universities. I don't get invited to them anymore because I used to win all the debates, and they thought, well, this guy's conservative, this guy's religious, so by definition he's got to be an idiot. So we'll bring him in and have him debate one of our professors and be sort of like the modern-day version of the Roman Colosseum. And then I'd wipe up the floor with him and they wouldn't invite me back anymore. So, Pushing people to the logical conclusion of their presuppositions, as Francis Schaeffer used to say.
Yes.